Hey guys, what's up? So today I'm gonna beat a dead horse. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the same exact pickup, put it in two very different guitars, and try and see for my own purposes if there's anything to this whole tonewood construction pickup debate that seems to not want to die on the internet. So let's get to it. Okay, so what I've done here today is I've created my own kind of modular pickup control assembly that I can easily fit into one of two guitars that I have chosen. I've taken what is essentially a P90 in a humbucker housing, or humbucker style P90, created my own little control cavity with a 500K volume pot and an output jack. I've wired it all up, shielded it all off, and I'm going to ground the pickup to the bridge by taping it to the bridge on the guitar. And what I can do with this is take any guitar like this ESP Horizon, pull the Fishman that's already in here out. Nice thing about Fishmans is you can just unplug them. Loosen up the strings, slide this guy right in, retension up the strings, and go for it. So this just makes it really easy to just kind of do a one-to-one comparison. And so let's talk about the guitars that I've chosen to actually do this with. First up, I have my ESP Horizon. This is a 1997 made in Japan ESP. Currently, it's got the Fishman kill switch engage set in it. It's a solid ash body. It's a bolt-on maple neck, and it's got a 25.5-inch scale. The other guitar I've chosen, because it also is a solid piece of wood, is this 1998 Gibson Les Paul Special. Solid mahogany body, set in mahogany neck, and it's got a 24.75-inch scale. So the similarities between these two guitars are not that much, but they do both have two-pneumatic style bridges. They do both have a bridge pickup that is the same distance from that bridge to the center of the humbucker. Also, they both have hip shot tuners. That doesn't really matter. They both have rosewood fretboards. Again, probably doesn't matter. 12-inch radius on the ESP, 14-inch radius on the Gibson. So really what I'm trying to get at here is that there's enough differences between these two guitars that using the same pickup, this generic humbucker size P90, we should hear something of a difference if any of that stuff really matters. If the tone wood matters, if the scale length matters, if the neck construction matters, then it should be discernible, if we're using the exact same pickup with the exact same electronics. Also, I'm going to make sure that this is, set up with the exact same string height, and I'm going to be putting on the Stringjoy Orbiter 10 to 52 sets on both these guitars. I just basically want to make sure that any potential variable that I can control is controlled, but I still want to know if these, stark differences in how these guitars are made has a real effect on the acoustic properties that this, pickup will pick up. So knowing all that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play 3 different clips from both of these guitars: a clean clip, a crunch tone clip, and a high gain clip, all using Neural DSP plugins. And you're just going to see guitar A and guitar B. And you're not going to know which one's which until a little bit later. I think that's the most fair way to kind of assess, with your ears, what you're potentially hearing without, taking your preconception about what I just told you about both these guitars into account. So with that being said, the first thing I have to do is go ahead and start swapping out these pickups and getting these guitars ready for the demo. Let's go. Okay, so I've had a chance to kind of listen and do, a little bit of ear analysis on the clips that I made. And, I have some thoughts. I'm not going to tell you quite yet what each guitar was, but it wasn't really a night and day thing. And, I personally expected there to be not much difference, especially with the high gain stuff. I thought if we were going to get anything kind of definitive, it would be in the clean channel, demo. However, even knowing kind of what my thoughts going into this kind of were about certain things, I still expected a little bit more, especially given the difference in scale lengths. That's always been my biggest takeaway between guitars. Things like scale length tend to matter because of how the strings will tend to oscillate in a wider pattern with a shorter scale length, especially strings of the same, gauge. I gotta say, I didn't hear quite the difference I was expecting, but that's not to say that I didn't hear any difference, though. I do think that there is something going on, especially in the lower end part of the frequencies between these two guitars that might be worth exploring a little bit more. And to do that, I think we should listen to the raw DI tracks and see what those sound like. And then I'm going to use a frequency analyzer to kind of parse out if there are any differences in the peak frequencies that are actually being captured through the DI. So let's go ahead and look at that. So you just listened to the two DI tracks for the clean tone demo that I did. So here we can look at the frequency response graphs for both guitar A and guitar B for those clips. Guitar A is in the red and guitar B is in the green. Now you can see that they pretty much match up for the most part. There's a little bit of bump in the high end for guitar B, but around the mid-range it all just kind of lines up. Now, when we get to the low end, guitar B starts to peel away in some of these peaks. And we get a bit more resonant frequencies in the sub 60 hertz range for guitar B. A little bit more of a bump in that 70, 75 hertz range. And it kind of follows in the 130, but we do have a little bit more low end separation down here. So let's go ahead and listen to the DI tracks for the high gain demo and see if those produce any similar or different results from what we got here. So yeah, you just heard the DI tracks for the high gain demo, and there was some noticeable differences, at least to my ear. But if we look at the analysis here, again, we have pretty much the same curve all the way through, and then it starts to get a little bit divergent in the low end, but not that much. This curve, at the sub 100 level, similar slope. We get a little bit more happening with the guitar B, but to be honest, there's just like this slight little bump here at the 140 level, and I think a lot of that has to do with those kind of like palm muted chugs. Guitar B just seems to give it a little bit more resonance in this frequency range. So it's not night and day by any means, but it is interesting to see. All right, so that is somewhat interesting. The low end frequencies, guitar B does seem to have a little bit more of a bump in that lower end. And I think you saw in those two curves compared that most of it, across the board is the same. But then you get towards that sub 100 hertz range, and even though those peaks were kind of matching each other, guitar B did have what seemed like more of an output in those lower frequencies. That just tells me that guitar B seems to have a little bit more sensitivity to the resonance of whatever's going on. And once I reveal which guitar is which, I think I can somewhat explain why that might be. Before we get to that, though, some of you might be going, well, look at this pickup. This is some cheap thing that you got off of Amazon, and, what is this? Like, I'm a metal player. I'm not going to play a humbucker size P90 in my guitar. Don't you have anything else? Well, I do. And so one of the things I did, and we'll listen to it right now, is I went ahead and I took this Fishman Modern that I have in my Gibson normally, and I put it in my ESP. And I went ahead and recorded the same three clean, crunch, and metal tones. And, we can check that out and see what that sounds like. So yeah, listening back to the Fishman pickups, one thing that was kind of striking to me was in the high gain stuff, one of the guitars did have a little bit more of somewhat more of a loose kind of saggier feeling on some of those, chuggy parts, which is interesting because once I tell you what these are, you're going to be like, well, there's maybe something to that. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and tell you which guitar was what. if you had guessed that guitar A was the ESP, on all accounts, you'd be correct. And if you were to guess that guitar B was the Gibson here, also correct. So a couple things that I noticed, now that you know what those are, A and B, I think the shorter scale length on the Gibson is contributing to the slight bump in that lower range frequency that we were seeing in the analysis curve. Even with the Fishman pickups, getting that little bit more of a saggy, kind of looser, chuggy sound, again, was coming, I think, from that scale length difference. It's only a 3/4 of an inch scale length difference, but shortening that scale length allows those strings to oscillate at a little bit of a wider pattern, and that is creating a little bit more field of movement, allowing those magnets to pick up more of that frequency range, I believe. Granted, I'm not, a physicist. I'm not even really that adept at magnetic stuff. Just the stuff I read, stuff I kind of deduce. And if anybody knows better, they can tell me. Some of you might be screaming, no, come on, it's the mahogany body. Mahogany's warmer. It's more resonant than ash. Well, maybe. But I think, when it comes to these types of things, I look at the mechanical aspect of what's happening over, just the qualitative kind of physical aspect of things like wood. Now, there's a lot of debate about tonewood. I'm not really here to try to dispel that so much, but at the same time, these two guitars aren't that far off from each other using the same pickups. And I think something like the scale length is going to have more of a contributing factor to how the pickups, essentially pick up the frequencies of the strings as they vibrate. So that's my thought on what's going on in those lower frequencies that we were seeing. So beyond all that science, jargon, whatever, to be honest, these two guitars don't play at all the same. The scale length definitely has something to do with that. This ESP is a very tight, very fast playing, super just responsive guitar. Everything is built for speed, and alternate picking on this guitar is some of the best that I can do, honestly. Now, if I go over to the Gibson, still a great guitar, for the most part. It's definitely got a looser feel to it, and, it is a shorter scale length. You have to dig in a little bit more. Trying to set the action on this isn't quite as easy as the ESP. It's just not quite that type of guitar. Now, I can play metal on this all day, thanks to the pickups, thanks to how I have it set up. But when you compare apples to apples, these are not that. This guitar tends to be a little bit more of a guitar that you have to feel a little bit while you play it. It's not quite an automatic thing. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just different. Knowing that, my biggest takeaway with guitars in general, the most important thing is how they feel in your hand when you're playing them. But the objective tone of the guitar isn't going to change just because you're able to play it better. You're just going to sound better because you're going to play it better. As humans, we're just able to pick up when things aren't right. When you hear somebody playing a guitar and they're struggling to hit the notes that they want, or they're just not feeling it, it does come through in what we're hearing. That's not necessarily the tone we're hearing, but it is the experience as a whole is not as good. So we kind of translate that into, man, that just sounds like garbage, or that doesn't sound right, And so obviously tone is one of the easiest things to kind of latch on to. So with that said, I don't want to belabor the point. I think you get what I did here. Hopefully you're able to gain something from this, knowing that the exact same pickup in two different guitars sounded about equally, good, with just some very subtle variation in how some of the frequencies were picked up. And my personal opinion is that it had more to do with the scale length than anything else. So go ahead and click like, subscribe if you want to, all the typical YouTube stuff, and I'll see you later.